Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this session. Again, I would like to reemphasize, I'm super excited that everyone's taking advantage of these breakout sessions where you can continuously learn about how you can leverage data going to the second half of the year. You may be coming from our previous session with Dale Mitchell from Fujitsu, who was talking about how you can set up audibles or how you can perfect that audible going into the second half. In alignment to that, for this session, what we like to do is talk about specifically sales management, utilizing data to manage your team in the most effective and efficient way. So the title today is going to be Sales Management's Moneyball Moments. And the guest speaker for today is going to be Pete Kazanjy, who is the founder of Modern Sales Pros Network, and also the founder of Atrium. So that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Pete, who is going to be talking about sales management with data.
Wonderful. Thanks, Isaac. Yeah, so I'm really excited for us to talk about sales management Moneyball moment here. As Isaac noted, I'm the founder of Atrium. We make sales, data-driven sales management software, but I'm also a bit of a sports analytics geek. And so what we're going to talk about today is what sales has to learn from advanced analytics in the upper echelons of athletic performance. So maybe some of the people who are here today have seen the movie Moneyball about the Oakland A's, or alternatively read the book. And so there's this phenomenal scene where Jonah Hill here has this conversation with Brad Pitt talking about how baseball management thinking is medieval, and how as a result of that medieval thinking, there's a huge failure in how baseball teams and management manage their teams, misjudge their players, and ultimately lose. And the reality is that you could swap out the words the same way, in the way that I've done here, and it would still be a pretty accurate rendition. And but the good news is it doesn't have to be that way. We're going to talk about how we can fix that, but first we're going to talk about how that got fixed in sales land, in athletics land first. So a little bit of history here. Advanced analytics kind of came to baseball first, and folks may be familiar with Moneyball, either the book or the movie, but really what it came down to is the fact that, one, baseball had hundreds of years, or north of 100 years, of performance data in the form of recorded baseball games, that had been scored. And what the A's did was they used that information to essentially for recruiting purposes, and they were able to recruit players who didn't look like your traditional, like high-end, attractive top prospect, but whose actual performance was really good for the price. And so you can actually see what's going on here, where this is a measure of payroll above league average or below league average, and then winningness. And so what you can kind of see here is that here's the New York Yankees up here, where their payroll is astronomically high, and then down here you've got the A's. So they're both very winning, right? As were the Boston Red Sox or the Dodgers or the Cardinals or what have you, the Atlanta Braves. But the A's do it with far, far less money, right? And so that was really powerful for a long time. The A's had a lot of success with not a lot of money in. And that was kind of the first application of data-driven management as applied to high-end athletics. But the cool thing is that it didn't stay in baseball, right? It made its way into basketball next. And the reason why it made its way into basketball was because data capture was advanced. Whereas on baseball's kind of a slower game, and so as a result, you can manually score things. In basketball, the game's a lot faster paced. And so what happened was, with the advent of motion capture cameras, and this allowed basketball analytics departments to really capitalize on a key insight, which is, if you look at this graphic right here, this is essentially a shot percentage. So the likelihood that a shot is going to go in from either in the key or close to the arc, like the 3-point line, or beyond the 3-point line. And one of the things that what they quickly realized is that you can actually make shots from just beyond the 3-point line. And the cool thing is that those shots end up being worth 3 points instead of 2 points. So it's not like the craziest insight, but what it kind of comes down to is, if you take that and you mix it with the expected point value, suddenly you can start understanding what the expected points are per shot. And so what people realized, or at least the people who did this data-driven analysis and then subsequent management and coaching realized, was that you could, by taking more 3-point shots from either down here at the baseline or up here at the arc, your percentages would be higher, your points per shot. And so the good news is that the Warriors, I'm based in San Francisco, so I'm a Warriors fan. The Warriors figured it out first. They said, hey, you know what? Maybe if we shoot more threes, it'll be good. And then maybe if we give the ball to the guy who can make those threes, it would be really good. And then maybe, you know what? If we can hire way more of those folks who can shoot more threes and make them, it would be even better. And so that's what they did. And so what you can see is the Warriors went from being a pretty solidly mediocre team in the early 2010s to just setting the world on fire and kicking just like running the table with everyone there. And so this is literally the result of data-driven management being applied to in-game play, coaching, recruiting, etc. But everybody else kind of figured it out too. And so what you can see here is, this is what the shot pattern looked like in 2001, which is across the entirety of the NBA, to 2019, right? So like, yes, the Warriors figured it out first, but everybody else kind of got hip to it as well, because they realized, well, if the Warriors were going to kick their butt, or the other teams that adopted this approach were going to kick their butt, well, I'm probably going to get fired as the coach or the GM or the VP of sales. Oh, wait, no, we're going to get to that last part. And so that was really powerful. So it permeated throughout the rest of the organization, or throughout the rest of the market. But the cool thing is like, there's always the next evolution. So it started in baseball with using Moneyball for recruiting and things like that. But then this ability to do motion capture extended to, like, also applied to baseball as well. And so what this visualization here is that this is the spray pattern, what's known as a spray pattern. These are all the hits that this guy, Curtis Granderson, he's a guy on the Toronto Blue Jays, has hit over, I forget which season it was. Yeah, 2015 to 2019. And so you can see this like super cluster of ground balls right here on the right side of the infield. And so people kind of got hip to that. They're like, man, this guy doesn't really, like, when he hits ground balls, he always hits them right here. You know what we should do? We should probably have the shortstop move over here. And we should have the second baseman move back here. And like, we'll pull the third baseman over in the event that he like accidentally crazily hits some sort of grounder over here, right? And so this is another example of a movement, a change in behavior, a change in coaching behavior in order to win as a result of better data-driven management, right? It's the taking advantage of new sources of data, doing analysis on that, and then changing the way that you play the game, changing behavior and changing coaching in order to win. The bad news is that not everybody changes. So this is a kind of an article on this poor guy, Ryan Howard, who really wasn't able to change how he plays the game as a hitter, and in response to that shift, right? These infield shifts here. And so you can kind of see this right here where Ryan Howard, when somebody's shifting on him, his batting average goes from 424, which is pretty amazing. That's an amazing batting average, to 282, which is, not terrible, but like not setting the world on fire, right? You can see the slugging percentage goes down, whatever. Essentially what it comes down to is 35% reduction in performance. And so the refusal or inability to change and to leverage this data has real world consequences from a performance standpoint, because the world moves on. If the world moves on, and if you don't adapt, it's going to be a problem. The cool thing is that the A's, I'm actually a Giants fan, even though I'm talking about the A's right now. The A's, because they have that data-driven muscle, they are the data-driven baseball management OGs. Once you have that muscle, it can be an ongoing source of advantage. So yes, the A's did a really good job of recruiting using Moneyball analysis and things like that. They're also one of the best adopters of infield shifts. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that organizations do, the baseball organizations do as well, in order to use data to their advantage. But this is just an example of like, hey, look, if you just decide, you know what, we're going to be data driven as a source of advantage, there are recurring mechanisms by which to bring that, to leverage that advantage throughout your quote unquote gameplay. So like making the decision to get religion and get data driven is something that ends up having, it's not a one-time thing. It then delivers benefits again and again and again and again. So that's baseball and basketball and athletics and how does this impact us in sales? Well, we're kind of in a similar situation right now where historically sales has not been data driven. These are kind of some visual manifestations of like the historical concepts of sales. Like, hey, look, you know what? We don't necessarily know what our reps are doing, and we don't know what they're doing wrong, and don't know what they're doing right. So as a result, you know what we're just going to say? We're going to say, hey, you should always be closing, and we're just going to yell at our reps to close harder, sell more, etc. Right? But the good news is that the best sales managers drive higher productivity in their organizations, and the best sales managers are data driven. And so if we can do this, what can happen? Like great things can happen, whether it's higher rep productivity, better rep retention, etc. And so the challenge though is that great sales management ends up being very difficult. Because there's a lot of things that they have to, that managers have to pay attention to. They have to do deal inspection and strategy. They have to track progress towards goals. They should be bringing data to their one-on-ones. They should be monitoring the ramp of new hires, and so on and so forth. Right? There's a bajillion things that they should be doing. The problem, of course, is that because managers are not necessarily enabled from a capacity standpoint or from a tooling standpoint to do all those things, they end up doing the thing that they're used to, which is largely deal inspection. Let's talk about deals. What's coming in? Can you pull that forward? Etc. And so this is the opportunity cost of not bringing data-driven management to the sales organization. But just the same as baseball in the Oakland A's Moneyball era, or basketball in the early 2010s, where all of a sudden now better data capture was available in order to facilitate better management or better analysis, and thus better coaching based on that analysis and better management based on that analysis. We as sales leaders and sales operations people, we have the data. We have cloud CRM systems like Salesforce, Dynamics, HubSpot. Most of our reps' work is being done in email and represented in the calendar. We have sales engagement tools that help us facilitate this. We have our calls being recorded. This data is now being captured, and so there's the opportunity for us to make use of that data in order to drive better management behaviors and improve rep performance. And that's really what the crux of all of this is taking advantage of data in order to analyze what's going on, to then change rep behavior to drive better team output. And so we have, as sales leaders, we have the opportunity to do this. Now, it is now available to us. The challenge, though, historically, is that managers have lacked the training and the tooling to succeed in this new era. And it makes sense, because if you haven't had the data historically, like, of course, why would you have the muscle? But now we do have the data, so now it's time to develop the muscle. And so there's kind of two problems here. One, manager enablement ends up being an afterthought. Most tooling is focused, most sales tooling is focused on helping managers forecast and understand a forecast as opposed to improving that forecast. Where are we going to land versus how can we make it such that we land in a better place? Enablement resources have a tendency to go to reps first. Usually in an organization, you're getting your first enablement hire maybe at 50 reps, maybe at 100 reps, you're adding another one or have you. That's going to go to helping reps with their discovery questions and their talk tracks and their upfront contracts and what have you first, versus enabling managers and teaching them how to be better managers. And then, of course, historically, ICs, managers come from ICs. Right? They're AEs who have been high-performing AEs who have been promoted, or high-performing SDRs that have been promoted. And the reality is that most people don't get into sales in order to like, hey, you know what? I'm going to get into sales so I can do spreadsheets all day long. No, like salespeople are communicators and charismatic and persuasive, and they're phenomenal communicators. And so they don't necessarily have those muscles. It doesn't mean that they don't want to have that capacity, but like it just doesn't naturally exist the same way that somebody coming out of operation, or somebody in operations maybe is coming out of a consulting background or finance, or has done finance or econ undergrad. And so we have to think about that, and enable that. We have to solve that enablement gap. Secondarily, if you think about what we provide to managers in order to do this, it's kind of barbaric. It ends up being these, what we like to call like a wall of charts, right? So like, okay, here's a bunch of charts. Go ahead and figure it out, Frank, which ends up being really tough. And so this is kind of the challenge to surmount. The opportunity is here, but this is the challenge that we sit here ready to surmount. And so what we like to say is the right approach here is what we refer to as data-driven sales management, where what managers are doing is they are focused on all the KPIs that matter for their reps and their teams. They are proactively tracking, they are setting and proactively tracking goals, in a time period. In retrospect, they're being alerted to potential problems. Hey, this person's win rate is lower than the other 20 mid-market sales reps on this team. What's going on there so we can intervene and change it? And then they're being assisted in understanding what the root causes, diagnosis of a potential problem is. Hey, this rep is struggling with respect to their bookings. Is it a win rate problem? Is it an average selling price problem? Is it a deal cycle problem? Is it an opportunity inflow problem? Oh, it looks like it's a win rate problem. Okay, why is it a win rate problem? Oh, it actually looks like it's the result of the fact that this rep's conversion rate from stage 3 is dramatically worse than everybody else's. That seems like the problem. Let's go fix that, right? And so this is how this is how Atrium approaches it, is by doing just this, by monitoring dozens and dozens of KPIs, pushing to the manager where those issues are, Like which reps are taking care of business, which reps are struggling, helping managers understand how people are progressing towards their goals, or alternatively not, such that we can intervene there ahead of time versus after it's too late, and then doing that analysis, that root cause analysis for managers. And then the benefits associated with this are really quite fantastic. This is an Atrium customer right here, Jamie Cronick, the Director of Sales Development. That allows her, she has 4 sales development managers. It allows her team, her managers, to stay on top of these goals, track ramp on reps, and self-serve things, self-serve insights. She's a leader, she's a sales development leader. It also works at the sales development manager level, right? So more junior folks who need more assistance there. Same sort of value proposition where people can focus on fixing the problems instead of trying to seek them out. And then of course this works in AE land as well, whereby bringing data to one-on-ones and to pipeline reviews and what have you. In this case, this team improved their pipeline hygiene by more than 80%, which led to a 30% improvement in win rates. And so the same way that we saw this with the Warriors, right, or the A's, by using analysis in order to change behaviors, we can drive better outcomes. So in the case of SAS Optics, driving better pipeline hygiene through a reduction of untouched opportunities then drove a substantial increase in win rate, because it turns out if you're more on top of your pipeline, you have a tendency to win more deals. I know, shocking. Which then drives higher bookings performance, right? And so the important thing is, like, by understanding what the problem is through analysis, we can change behavior to drive better outcomes. And the same, of course, applies on the SDR front as well. This is a different Atrium customer who, before Atrium's deployment, that the SDR team was at a certain level of activity. Very quickly, they realized that they could overclock that a little bit more, based on, especially in a distributed environment, where you have a bunch of SDRs working from home right now. And what that did was it led to a 50% lift in opportunity creation per SDR per week, which was very impactful. And so the cool thing is that this is my offer to you. One of the really neat things about DataDriven Sales Manager, or at least the way that Atrium goes about it, is that you can get started in less than 2 minutes. You can just sign in. You can go to atriumhq.com and you can sign in with your Salesforce account, set up an account, a free account. It takes 2 minutes. There's a wizard that'll configure things for you, and then it'll show you all manner of critical insights for your organization. Lastly, we love to talk with folks. We love to advance the craft and the understanding of data-driven sales management in the market. And so we love giving away data-driven sales management books. So if you'd like to come have a discovery chat with one of our sales strategy advisors, we'd love to give you a set of the best data-driven sales management books that are on the market. You can sign up for that here. So I think that was it. So maybe we can do some questions now.
Yeah, thanks for that, Pete. That was really good. I actually didn't know that the Warriors were the first to jump on that trend, but it makes sense, right?
What's your favorite? So you're in Texas, I want to say, right, Isaac? Are you a Rockets fan?
I'm an MFFL, Mavs fan for life. So big Cuban guy too.
Nice. Well, yeah, because the Rockets are extremely data driven as well. So much so that they kind of get criticized for having reduced the game to just like, a pretty rote approach. But yes, Mark Cuban's definitely very entertaining on the sidelines for the Mavs, at least. Yeah,
definitely. So we do have a few questions that came in. A lot of great questions here. So. I think we'll pick 3 for today, since we are running short on time.
Delightful.
But the first question for you, Pete, is going to be, we don't really have a data-driven culture. What best practices in terms of introducing data-driven sales management to our organization?
Yep, for sure. And by the way, like most sales organizations are not going to have a data-driven like data-driven culture, because we're in the moment right now. We're only now have the precursors showed up to allow that. So it's not surprising, but that's okay. Like, so it's okay that it hasn't been the case in the past. It's not okay for us not to embrace the reality of the present and change. And so what I like to recommend there is just like a maturity model, right? There's crawl, walk, run. And so rather than like jumping into the jacuzzi all at once, you can say, hey, what are the initial set of goals that we want to start tracking, right? Like maybe there's an initial set of KPIs, leading indicator KPIs that we start paying attention to on the AE team. So rather than it just being what's the forecast at and what's our pipeline, maybe we start extending that out a little bit and saying, hey, well, maybe we should be paying attention to new opportunity inflow on a monthly basis and set a goal around that because it's a leading indicator to pipeline. And maybe, you know what, maybe we should be paying attention to actual volume of selling activity, maybe customer facing meeting volume. Right. The good news is that's captured right in the calendar. So with clever software, we can pull that information off there. And then maybe we add like a quality indicator on there as well. Maybe we set a goal on untouched opportunities. We say, hey, we have an expectation. So like, but let's stop with there. Right. So let's just maybe add 2, maybe add 3, and then see how that works. Does it drive the outcomes that we want? By setting a goal on saying, hey, we want to be under this amount of untouched opportunities. Do we see that change? Hey, we said you weren't supposed to be shooting from inside the arc. Are you only shooting 3s like we told you to? Oh, you are? Fantastic. Maybe now we can go to the next level. Oh no, people aren't adopting this. Well, now we can work in order to facilitate that. So that's the first thing. The second thing I might think about is, where does this get consumed in the operating rhythm of an organization? And so usually the great places to facilitate the consumption of that more basic kind of crawl situation of data-driven management would be team meetings on Monday. Like if you're having a team meeting or a forecast meeting or whatever, just add a 5-minute little thing where you're just like, hey, look, we're gonna check out our goals. How did we do last week on customer-facing meetings? How are we doing this month? It's the second week of the month. How are we doing on new op inflow? Right? So just making sure that we're consuming it. And then secondarily, in our rep one-on-ones, making sure that rep one-on-ones are not devolving into like deal review, but instead we're making space in those to say, hey, look, we're going to maybe do deal strategy. We're going to spend 20 minutes of this 30 minutes doing deal strategy, but we're going to spend 10 minutes doing paying attention to these metrics. So those are the kind of the 2 things. It's like start small, and then start small and extend, and then make sure that it's being embedded and woven into the operating rhythm.
Great. So the second question we have, Pete, is how do you go about figuring out what KPIs and metrics to goal on?
Yeah, good question. So the good news is not dissimilar to the to athletics. There's a generalized set of KPIs that matter for sales reps, right? The same way that for baseball we pay attention to at bats and hits and batting average and what have you. The same thing applies in sales as well. I'm just grabbing another slide here to kind of show. And so the good news is that there are a generalized set of KPIs, and what you can do is you can say, like, this is a AE kind of revenue formula driver tree, and then this is the SDR analog to that. And so what you would do is you start at the left side and kind of move your way right. So obviously we pay attention to bookings. Turns out. So then what are the precursors to bookings? Well, wins is a precursor to bookings. Average sales price is a precursor to bookings. Win rate and attempts are a precursor as well. And so just selecting, kind of starting in the lagging indicators and then starting to move right and selecting more of those KPIs can be very helpful. Again, depending on your level of maturity, you might want to, don't want to go whole hog and kind of like choke yourself with that. I'm trying to find the relevant resource here. So on the Atrium website, because we're a bunch of sales nerds over here, we have a bunch of really fantastic resources there. And I think there's one on metrics selection in here. in here somewhere. So yeah, go ahead and check that out. And there's like a little, oh, here we go. Sales metrics level setting and publishing template there. So that's the way to kind of approach that, Isaac.
Yeah, great feedback on that. The last question we have, Pete, is going to be, actually, I do have an additional question that I want to ask. But the last question is going to be, what would data-driven sales management look like for a company that sells high ASP deals?
Right. Yeah. So oftentimes in enterprise, say like high ASP, like, 100K plus, 300K plus, longer deal cycles, people oftentimes will say like, hey, you know what? Like this rep is only managing 10 opportunities, and there, are 20 opportunities at any given point in time, and they're only going to close like, 2 to 5 deals a year. How can we use data to manage that? And I think the response to that is like, well, you still can measure it. It just turns out that the levels will be different. So for instance, like a win rate will be pretty challenging there because, if you're only closing 10 or 20 accounts a year, like close winning or close losing, like there's not enough of a sample size there. That being said, obviously, if you think about the sales behaviors that those reps are engaging in, they should be multi-threading those organizations like crazy. They should know everybody, right? Like in a pre-COVID era, they should be badged, right? They should be going into the office constantly. So that actually can show up metrically. We can say, hey, look, how many contacts are they engaging per accounts? Or specifically, how many contacts are they engaging in this account? Are they engaging in a high volume of selling activity? Just because you're only working 10 or 20 ops, that doesn't mean, like, you still have 40 hours in your week. So the frequency of meetings, the volume of meetings can still be appreciable. It shouldn't be 3 a week. It can still be 10, probably not 15, especially if you're going on site, post once folks are kind of doing that again. So you can still measure these things to make sure that the selling behaviors that drive success in high ASP sales motions are happening. And then moreover, in a lot of these high ASP situations, because we get tunnel vision on the deals that are kind of getting close to the goal line, such that sometimes what we can do is forget to backfill our pipe. And so even if we're paying attention to these, we're babysitting these 10 or 20, mega ops, we still need to make sure that like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 ops are coming into the pipe on a monthly basis, or else in 180-day sales cycle from now, we're going to be in a world of hurt. And so even though you can still use data to measure the effectiveness of that sales motion, even in a high ASP environment. Some of it, like the levels will change, right? The number of contacts that you're engaging per account. If you're selling $500,000, B2B CDP software or what have you, or $100,000 B2B CDP software, are going to be different than if you're selling, reservation software to SMBs, right? That's probably like a 1 or 2 call close and maybe only dealing with one stakeholder versus the other one where it's like 6-month sales cycle, a 9-month sales cycle where you're interacting with 15 stakeholders or 20 stakeholders. The KPIs end up being the same. The levels end up being very different. So in summation, you can use data to measure and improve a high ASP sales motion. It's just a little different than the more velocity ones.
Great. And to finalize this session, gotta ask you this question: who you got in the finals, Pete? I know you're going to be biased with the Warriors, but just gotta get your feedback.
Say that. Sorry, my headset cut out. NBA finals.
Yeah, who you got?
Well, I think I'm hoping. Are the Warriors in? Did they make it in? Did they play in or not? I mean, obviously I have to go for the Warriors, even though I'm not a huge Warriors fan. I'm more a fan of their data-driven approach. But if not them, it's got to be the Lakers because I'm a big LeBron fan, just because he's so great at what he does.
There you go. That's always the good safe answer, right? Be a LeBron
I
fan.
know. Yeah, I know. It's kind of basic, but come on, like, gotta, game recognize game.
There we go. Okay, well, thank you for joining today, P. Really appreciate the content you shared. I mean, it was awesome just to learn about, data-driven approaches to managing your sales team. So thank you again. Really appreciate having you on here.
Yeah, it was super fun. Thanks for having me.